words.
David Nixon. David, how you doing, brother?
What's going on, fellas?
We have, well, there's one of us. We had a bet that you were on a golf course or not. So can you tell us where you are?
I am in my office here in downtown Salt Lake. So whoever bet that I actually be working today won. So congratulations.
That was Brian and I.
Yeah.
Spencer thought you were golfing.
Yep.
Our Twitter question today. What's that?
Hey, I don't golf every day, okay? I get out every once in a while. Not as much as I wish or I'd like to, but you got to sharpen up on the golf game for those times that we go do little scrambles,
Yeah.
I mean, I wish, so we say that, right? Like me and Jerem and Spencer and probably a couple others. It's almost the opposite. Like, I wish I can go out to the golf course here and there.
We wish we were you, Brian.
But yeah. Like, I wish I was you too, man. I mean, you just what 3 hours out of your entire work week you are in your office. We just happen to catch you.
Yeah.
Wow, crazy! You're actually in there.
Exactly.
Our Twitter question, David: who is the best team BYU football faced in 2017? So we're not saying toughest because that takes into account when it happens on the schedule,
everything,
what's going on, Andrew, blah blah. Who's the best? Like when the dust settles and we look back, and that's West Virginia for last year's BYU football schedule. Who will be the best team that BYU plays?
So that's a loaded question, but I'm going to say that just based off numbers and how they finished last year, I think you have to go Wisconsin. Returned 15 starters. They went 11-3, finished strong. They've got a quarterback returning. He's only a sophomore, but Alex Hornibrook's coming back. I mean, you've got just experience there, right? I think for BYU, the toughest matchup, and once again, I'm not taking into account when the season occurs, but is LSU. And I think for the sole reason that BYU struggles against teams that have obviously great athletes on the field, and that's exactly what LSU has. I'm not saying Wisconsin doesn't have great athletes, but I think BYU matches up well against Wisconsin. We look back to, 2013, when BYU, it felt like we were getting slaughtered, but in reality we were only down 10 points, and we were kind of within reaching distance the whole game, even though they were dominating it, and Melvin Gordon ran all over BYU's defense. But putting that aside, I think BYU matches up well against those guys. I mean, they're very similar to Nebraska, right? I mean, they're big bodies, kind of those corn-fed type dudes. But BYU has a lot of these poly guys that match up well in the trenches, and so I think Wisconsin, although on paper, they finished strong, like I said, and return, a ton of starters. I think BYU, as far as a mismatch on the matchup, would be LSU.
David, other than Wisconsin and LSU, who else do you think is in the mix?
Well, there's also been a lot of talk about Mississippi State, right? Mississippi State with Nick Fitzgerald, they did, it went 6-7 last year, but they showed some glimpses of promise. I just think, Mississippi State, you look at their schedule, it's just so brutal. And I think, facing LSU, Georgia, Auburn, kind of list goes on of, Alabama. It's just tough for that group to have a killer season per se and be that top dog. But no doubt that BYU playing at Mississippi State will be obviously a tough game, especially that environment. You got the cowbells, everything, all of that sort. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, that's the fun thing about talking about football in May and June and July is that who knows how it's going to play out, because as we saw last year, you had some teams that we thought were going to be much better than they were, and then teams that kind of snuck up on us and gave us a game that we thought would be a cakewalk.
Okay, so with that in mind, who's going to be the Michigan State or UCLA teams that we thought would be really good, but we're not?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually think it will be Mississippi State, to be honest. I know they've had a lot of hype. We just talking about it, but when you have to play that brutal of a schedule and that early of a schedule, I mean, they play a couple cakewalks in the first few games of the year, but then they jump right into play with LSU, with Georgia, with Auburn, at Texas A&M later down the road. I mean, it's tough in the SEC to get bowl eligible. I mean, you've got to be a pretty good team to even get bowl eligible, as we saw with them going 6-7 last year, and they were a good team. And so I think Mississippi State is one of those ones that's catching fire right now. I think they're getting a lot of publicity and a lot of exposure. But I think at the end of the day, I think they'll be what they are, which is a mid-SEC, mid-pack SEC team.
David, do you think I'm crazy to answer that?
Oh, what?
To answer that same question. Don't think out loud, Jerem. Do you think I'm crazy to answer that question with LSU, that I think that LSU is going to be the Michigan State of this year?
Yes. I do. You can't. LSU has enough athletes, and with their recruiting classes, they restock those guys every year to the point where you just can't count them out. They're going to win 9-10 games a year, and I think what Ed Orgeron's got going on down there, I think he's got the kids excited. You know, Les Miles was there for years, and now Orgeron's got him, and he's got implementing his schemes, and you know, he's one of those hype coaches that the players love to play for him, and you know, we call those coaches players coaches because. You know, he understands what the toll that football takes on you, and he treats your bodies well as far as practice and things like that go. And so, you know, LSU is a team I would never bet against for sure. they too much experience, and they know what success tastes like. They've been at the top of that SEC for years and are always, you know, 1 or 2 in the SEC West, and so you know, for them to fall, I just don't see it. I see another team. Like a Mississippi State who's still trying to figure out their identity and still trying to decide, you know, do we belong in the top tier? Can we get up and break into that top tier? I think it's one of those type of teams that if early in the season they lose some of those games like LSU and Georgia and Auburn, man, it's a team that might fold and kind of pack it in for the season.
I didn't want to ask that. Bravid told me that I had to ask that question, so, you know, yeah.
I love me some Bravid, no doubt.
I love Bravid. I just don't like looking at Bravid.
Right, yeah.
There's a distinct difference.
That makes 3 of us, I think.
Yeah, we still got to get him a date, man.
Well, that makes 4 of us with Bravid, I think.
We still got to find him a date, man. You know, like I've been trying to go on these dating sites and put his profile picture up.
I know you haven't.
There's nothing I can do about it.
You said in the Fall On Countdown, you said Bravid gets girls.
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't. No.
He gets 0 girls.
FarmersOnly.com will only work for that guy. David Nixon is on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Okay, so last year, West Virginia, I wouldn't have picked them as the best team on BYU's schedule. I think they were 8-5 coming into the year. They ended up being this ranked team. Is there a team on BYU's schedule this year that you think could be the West Virginia? They are much better than we think right now.
So I think that's a tough one to predict. But I will say this. I think the toughest game that people are underestimating for BYU, not necessarily I think the season you'll look at a team and say, oh, they excelled. But I think the toughest game for BYU is actually the East Carolina game. And I say that because East Carolina is at the end of the, you know, I think it's a 6-game stretch for BYU where it's just brutal. LSU, Utah, Wisconsin, Utah State,
Boise State. Yep.
Mississippi State, and then East Carolina. So, you know, they're game 7 down the road. And that game just scares me because you go back east to Mississippi State, turn around, come back home, and you go back east again to East Carolina. You know, BYU, as we know, has not fared well going east. It's just always a struggle with the time change, things like that. And so it just that game worries me, to be honest. You know, and they're nothing special. I think they went 3-9, or they obviously had a losing record. They only returned 11 starters, so it's not anything glaring there. But it just scares me, and I think it's going to be the result of a long stretch to start the season. And really, in reality, that's kind of the first chance you get to really catch your breath is that game. And those are the ones that always can, you know, jump up and scare you and maybe bite you. Because I think all BYU fans would agree that we look at our schedule and we say, hey, you know, we pick out the wins and losses, and I think everyone counts East Carolina as a win. And sometimes players have the mentality going into those games, and you know, people call them trap games. Not necessarily a trap game because the next game is San Jose State, but you know, I think it's one of those games that's going to be much tougher than we all anticipate.
Now to the question, or to the team that matters the most on the schedule, Utah. Where do you see Utah fitting in all of this?
I got to be careful what I say about Utah because last time I made a mention and my Twitter blew up for like 8 weeks straight.
It's okay. You can block people.
Mute
David.
button.
Well, listen, Utah, they're great.
David, let's get you in a better spot here. You know, you can't have your 2 kids climbing on you and talking to us at the same time here.
Well, clearly, man, he spoke it into existence. He said
he started talking about Utah, and all of a sudden his signal fades out.
Exactly.
He's in Salt Lake.
I got to be careful, right?
Okay, let's try again with David. let's see if the Utes on the phone line have jumped in or not. Go, David. Utah. What do you think?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you now. We got the Utes off the line.
You guys need to upgrade your Boost Mobile.
I think the Utes are hanging on the power line.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're
– It's the new offensive coordinator coming in. It's going to be an interesting deal to see, how that scheme plays out. We saw that happen with BYU last year, right? With Detmer coming in, going from Anai to Detmer, how tough that was, the transition for offenses because your personnel doesn't quite fit that scheme. So it makes me to see how that plays out for Utah. There's just too many question marks. Have they unveiled their entire scheme yet or not? Have they saved plays for you? It's an operating game up in the air. Fortunately, it's at home, but that's a scary game, to be honest, especially, like I said, how early in the season it is.
All right, David, we appreciate the time, man, and we can't wait to break down more stuff and have the Utes blow up your Twitter again. Thanks, David.